Everyone in the small town was talking about the wedding, not because it was grand or lavish, but because no one could understand why a billionaire would choose to marry a simple, quiet woman like Ella. She wasn't rich, she didn't come from a powerful family, and she lived a life most people would call ordinary. But today was supposed to be her big day, the day she walked down the aisle and started a new chapter with the man of her dreams. The guests had all arrived, dressed in their finest. The venue was stunning, the music played softly, and the air buzzed with excitement. But as Ella stood at the altar, clutching her bouquet with trembling hands, whispers began to spread like wildfire. The groom was nowhere to be seen. Minutes passed, then more. The joy quickly turned into judgment. Laughter, sneers. Some guests even walked out, and then someone from the crowd shouted what everyone else was thinking. Asterisk, she's been left asterisk. Ella's heart sank. Her eyes scanned the room, searching for one familiar face, someone to stand by her. But no one did. Not even her own family stepped forward. A bridesmaid snickered. A cousin shook her head. Her moment had turned into a public embarrassment, and it seemed like the whole world was watching her fall apart. Just when Ella thought it couldn't get worse, the doors to the hall flung open. Heads turned. The room fell silent, and there he was, her billionaire fiancé, standing tall, eyes burning with something between anger and heartbreak. What he said next would leave everyone speechless and completely change the way they saw Ella. But before that moment could unfold, everything paused. Because what happened next, no one saw coming. Everyone stared as Daniel Blake, the billionaire groom, stepped into the room. His tailored suit was dusted with raindrops, his expression unreadable. No one dared speak. The same people who had mocked Ella moments earlier now shifted in their seats, their faces pale. Some tried to hide their smirks, others just looked away, pretending they hadn't joined in the humiliation. But Ella, she stood frozen, her eyes locked on Daniel, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. He slowly walked down the aisle, past the judgmental stares, past the whispers that had once seemed harmless gossip. Every step he took felt heavy with something deeper. This wasn't just a late groom. Something else was going on. What people didn't know was that Ella and Daniel's story hadn't begun like a fairy tale. There was no glamorous first meeting, no sweeping romantic gestures at the start. They met in the most unlikely of places, a quiet bookstore tucked away in a forgotten corner of the city. She worked there. He was just another face among the shelves. Also, she thought. For months, Ella had no idea Daniel was wealthy. He wore simple clothes, asked thoughtful questions, and listened when she spoke. He treated her like a person, not like someone to impress. It wasn't until much later that she learned the truth about his life, about the empire he ran, the headlines he avoided, and the family that didn't approve of her. And now, standing in front of her wedding guests, Daniel's eyes scanned the crowd. His jaw tightened. Something had happened before he arrived, something that explained the delay. But he hadn't come empty-handed. He carried with him not just truth, but something that would shake every single person in that room. And then he reached into his coat. Daniel's hand disappeared into his coat, and for a heartbeat, the entire room held its breath. He didn't pull out a ring or a letter or anything anyone expected. Instead, he took out a small velvet box, old, worn, and clearly not from any luxury brand. He held it gently, like it meant something more than money ever could. Then he looked at Ella, his voice low but steady. "I should have been here sooner," he said, glancing around at the guests, "but something happened this morning, and it wasn't an accident." Gasps rippled through the crowd. People leaned forward, curiosity mixing with guilt. No one knew what to say, but Daniel wasn't finished. "Someone didn't want this wedding to happen," he continued, his eyes resting on a sharply dressed woman in the front row. Ella recognized her immediately. Clara, Daniel's cousin. She'd always looked down on Ella, always made subtle comments about how she wasn't wife material for someone like him. Clara didn't flinch, but she looked away. Meanwhile, Ella stood frozen, her mind racing. Why hadn't Daniel told her something was wrong? And what exactly had happened? She looked at the box in his hand. It wasn't the ring she'd picked with him. This was something else entirely, something that clearly had a story. What the guests didn't know was that Ella had been receiving strange messages in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Anonymous notes, misdirected phone calls. She thought it was just nerves, or maybe cold feet. But now, with Daniel's words hanging in the air, it all started to feel connected. The silence in the room grew heavier. Daniel took a breath, stepped forward, and handed the box to Ella. "Open it," he said softly. She looked down and slowly lifted the lid. Ella's fingers trembled as she lifted the lid of the small velvet box. Inside wasn't the diamond ring anyone expected. Instead, resting on a faded velvet cushion was a tiny folded note, worn from being handled too many times. The crowd leaned in, eyes wide with curiosity and disbelief. Ella's breath caught in her throat. She carefully unfolded the note, the words handwritten and hurried. Asterisk, trust no one. Clara isn't who she seems. Asterisk. A murmur spread through the room like wildfire. Clara's face tightened, her composure flickering for the first time all evening. Daniel's gaze bore into the crowd, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "There's more," he said. "This wasn't just about me being late. Someone tried to ruin everything, not just this wedding, but Ella's reputation too." Ella's mind raced, piecing together the strange messages she'd ignored, the cold stares, the whispered gossip that had seemed harmless before. Was this really a simple case of jealousy or something far darker? She looked back at Clara, who now sat rigid, eyes darting away as if hiding a secret. The guests shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to stay or leave, caught between scandal and sympathy. Daniel moved closer to Ella, protective but clearly ready to fight whatever storm was coming. Suddenly, the doors burst open again. A man in a sharp suit rushed in, holding out a thick envelope addressed to Daniel. The tension exploded. Who was this stranger, and what did he bring? Daniel's eyes flicked to the envelope, then to Ella, as if deciding how much truth to reveal in front of everyone. The room held its breath. Ella's simple wedding had transformed into a battlefield of secrets, betrayal, and power. And just when it seemed like the worst was behind them, the stranger's voice cut through the silence with a chilling warning. "This changes everything." The stranger's words hung heavy in the air, sending a ripple of shock through everyone present. Daniel took the envelope, his hands steady but his eyes darkening. Without breaking eye contact with Ella, he opened it slowly. Inside were documents, contracts, photographs, and emails, all pointing to a scandal far worse than anyone could have imagined. "This isn't just about Clara trying to sabotage the wedding," Daniel said, his voice low but fierce. "It's about a conspiracy to take control of my entire company, and Ella's being used as a pawn." Gasps echoed through the hall. Ella felt her stomach twist. How deep did this go? She had thought her biggest problem was facing judgment from Daniel's family, but now it seemed she was caught in something much bigger, something dangerous. Clara's eyes flashed with anger, but she said nothing. The room's atmosphere thickened with tension, everyone suddenly aware that this was no longer just a family drama. It was a battle for power, trust, and survival. Daniel stepped forward, placing a protective arm around Ella. "I never wanted her dragged into this," he admitted, voice cracking with emotion. "But now it's clear. Someone close to me has been working behind my back, and this wedding was the perfect moment to destroy everything we've built." Ella's mind raced. She looked around, searching for allies among the guests, but found only suspicion and doubt. The quiet woman no one expected to matter was suddenly at the center of a dangerous game. The stranger, who had arrived out of nowhere, glanced at Daniel and then back at Ella. "You need to be careful," he warned, "because those who want to bring you down won't stop at humiliation. They'll go further." Ella swallowed hard, realizing her wedding day had just become the beginning of a fight she never saw coming. Daniel's voice grew stronger as he addressed the stunned crowd. "I've been betrayed by someone I trusted most," he said, glancing sharply at Clara, whose carefully built facade was finally cracking. "She planned to ruin this wedding and take control of my company, but we're not going down without a fight." Ella, still holding the small velvet box with a mysterious note inside, felt a new strength rise within her. She stepped beside Daniel, meeting Clara's gaze without fear. "You thought I was just a simple woman you could push aside," Ella said quietly but firmly, "but I'm not what you expected." With the stranger's evidence in hand, Daniel confronted Clara, revealing how she had secretly forged documents, spread lies about Ella, and tried to turn the family and business against them. Clara's smirk vanished, replaced by panic as the room closed in on her betrayal. Security quietly escorted her out, while whispers swirled like wildfire. The guests shifted, their judgment replaced by admiration for Ella's courage and Daniel's loyalty. What started as a public humiliation turned into a powerful moment of truth. Ella realized that being simple didn't mean being weak. It meant being real, honest, and strong enough to face the storm. Just as relief began to settle, Daniel opened the small box again. Inside was a second note, this one handwritten by someone unexpected. It read, "Watch your back. This is only the beginning." Ella's heart pounded. The fight wasn't over. Someone else was still out there, watching, waiting, and willing to do anything to tear them apart. But this time Ella and Daniel were ready. Together, in the days that followed, the wedding that had begun with humiliation slowly transformed into a story of resilience and unexpected strength. Ella and Daniel stood side by side, facing not just the gossip and judgment of the town, but the challenges that came with protecting their future together. The documents revealed by the stranger led to a deeper investigation, exposing more than just Clara's betrayal. It showed how power and greed could poison even the closest relationships. Ella found herself growing stronger with each passing day. The simple woman everyone underestimated became a symbol of courage, proving that kindness and honesty were far more powerful than wealth or status. Daniel, once seen as a distant billionaire, showed a side many had never witnessed: loyalty, humility, and a fierce dedication to the woman he loved. The small velvet box, with its mysterious notes, became a reminder of how easily trust could be broken, and how important it was to hold onto it when it mattered most. Together, they faced the unknown threats hinted at in that final message, but this time with a united front. Family members who had doubted Ella began to see her in a new light, and slowly, barriers started to break down. The wedding that was almost ruined became a new beginning, not just for Ella and Daniel, but for everyone who had watched their story unfold. In the end, it wasn't the billionaire's wealth or power that made the difference. It was the simple truth of standing by someone when the world seemed ready to tear them apart. Ella's journey showed that no matter how ordinary you feel, strength and love can change everything. And while the future held its uncertainties, one thing was clear: together, they were unstoppable.